Alright, guys, it's time to continue with some very, very basic but extremely important fundamentals of orchestrating your tracks. So, we're going to talk about some of your main elements here: the melody, the harmony, and the texture, and also a little bit about how to use orchestration for them. So, when you're going to start orchestrating your tracks, maybe you're even, recording a little bit around in your DAW and playing around with things like I have been doing here. Either way, you need to keep in mind that less is more. At this stage, you want to focus only on the essentials that we created in the last chapter. And one of the great things with the orchestration form is that you're kind of limiting yourself. You're not adding in random things like new elements, but you're assigning elements to the limited sections of melody, harmony, counter melody, textures, and so on. And you've already been writing these things, so every time you put a new instrument into, say, the melody or the harmony or the ostinato box of your orchestration form, you are not adding any new musical elements, but you're just doubling and expanding on what's already there. And this is going to give you a bigger, more cohesive, more powerful and tidy, clean sound. That's going to sound bigger and more complex than it really is. Because if you have any idea for some instruments you want for any melody, harmony, or other part in any section, just fill that into the orchestration form. We want a few elements that are so well structured and written that they fill out the entire audible spectrum pretty much, rather than a bunch of poorly written elements fighting for space and making just a mess in your orchestration and your mix. And you might remember that in the counter melody chapter, we talked about separation through range, rhythm, articulation, and tone color. You also want to keep in mind that for all of your elements, you want to follow these kind of guidelines. You want the melody to sound separated from the ostinato and from your chords and from the counter melodies and so on. Failing to do so will usually result in a very messy and cluttered arrangement. Check the audio and image examples below this video for a little example of the importance of this. If you haven't checked them out yet, I recommend that you just pause the video right here and just go down and check them out, because they can quickly give you a little idea of what I'm talking about here. Now, another little tool before we get into more things here is what I call the reverse composition check. So say we have this little theme that I play that goes like this. And so on, What I like to do is to just play it only on piano, or arrange it for only piano using your mouse if you have to. Because if the main elements are well written and interesting, combined in a structured way, it will sound good, like when you're playing it only on the piano. Most good compositions sound good if you strip it down and play it only on the piano, like if I take, say, Two Steps from Hell. And so on, so you can check if something sounds compelling and interesting and it's kind of moving you when it's in its most naked form, it will sound good when you orchestrate it well. If it doesn't sound good with only the piano simplified, it's likely not the best composition. I think it was Einstein that said, if you cannot explain something simply, you simply don't understand it well enough. And there's a lot of truth to that. But similarly, I feel that if you cannot perform your composition simply, like with a solo piano, it is simply not written well enough. For example, there are way many things going on at once without really anything, taking the attention as the main melody, or maybe the different elements are crashing together, creating a mess. Or maybe it just doesn't sound compelling and interesting enough. Maybe your melody is not written well enough to be interesting on its own. And if this is the case, just go back to your theme and see how you can fix this. Maybe it's a lack of good separation, maybe it needs a change of harmony, maybe there's not enough of a top point in your melody to really engage your listener, maybe you've not, been using good motif development, or so on. But the thing is that if you strip things down to only piano, finding the problems with your composition, at least to me, becomes 10 times more easier, than trying to figure out what's the problem when you have been arranging it for 100 instruments and you're just trying to find the problem. The easiest way to me is just to strip it down, take it to only piano, and play around with that with only the harmonies and the melodies, and maybe you have the counter melodies too. Because then your main problems are quickly gonna become very apparent and you can fix them before you move on. Now, let's take a quick little example and see how I've separated the different elements in this little composition. So we have this little theme, and I've just, play the melody, I guess, in some violins and woodwinds here. Create a little ostinato in the background on the piano, and just played some chords in strings. And I think we might have a little counter melody in the cello as well. So let's just listen to it, and we'll have a little talk after that. So that's a quick little arrangement I did for that very track. Now, it's not like anything special, but what I've been doing is that I've been trying to achieve some separation. And if I wrote this into my orchestration form, and this is the first A section, I'd write, oboe and flute for the melody together with the violin, like first violins. Then I would probably write that they're being doubled by the violas, which seems to be happening here in octaves. So that would go into my melody box in the first A section. Now, I would also write in the counter melody section, I'd write this little cello melody. As you can see that, this is like the little counter melody that's moving when the main melody is resting, as we've been discussing before. Because, we already have all these main elements written, and it's now just about assigning them to different instruments. So, we also have these little chords that I just play in strings, really, like string chords. And that's something I'd write into the orchestration form as well. And then we have this little quick ostinato thing in the background in like piano and harp and something like this. And this is also something I'd write into the ostinato section or other or texture, depending on how you're using the form. Now, let's say I want to create a bigger arrangement of the same thing. Now, guess what I would do? Like, if I want a second A section like this, I would not just, add in random things or play any random things with the different instruments here. What I would do is that I would look at the orchestration form and I would assign new instruments to the existing things, keeping it simple. Maybe I would add some staccato strings to double this quick ostinato in the background. Maybe I'd add a horn to the counter melody in the cellos. Maybe I'd double the melody by adding in some legato choirs, singing like some kind of long sustained notes. You see where I'm heading? Like, I'm always just adding in extra things. Maybe I'd add in some low brass and some other low woodwinds to help fill out the chords. Maybe I even wanted to add in like a little synth, like a little pad to double the strings in the next section. And if I have that in mind, I'll write that into orchestration form as well. Because when you keep doubling down on these things without just adding in a bunch of random things, your orchestration is going to sound 10 times bigger. It's going to sound way more organized and clean, and your mixes is going to be so much more clean and wide and powerful. So remember to keep things simple and keep separation in mind. Like, if I open up these things right now, like one melody, one counter melody, and I'm going to take just a bass note to keep things simple in the MIDI here. You can see that everything is separated fairly well. We have the melody and the counter melody, which are in the same range, but they are separated by rhythm. One is moving while the other one is resting, and the other way around. Then we have the ostinato, which you see is the highest element here in terms of range, but it's also, different articulation and different rhythm. It's quicker than everything else, it's higher up than everything else, and it's playing short notes compared to the long notes in every other element. So we have some good separation going on here. And again, we have the chords which are, existing in this kind of space with the bass and the extra chords here. So they are also different in rhythm because they're just long and sustained while everything else is moving, and they're in a lower range. So as you see here, I've been getting a fairly okay separation, and even if you see there's some overlapping, the rhythms and the tone colors are so different that it's not going to be a problem at all. And the beauty about this is that when, like, say if I decide to add 10 instruments on this one, 10 instruments on that, 10 instruments on this, 10 instruments on that, the separation is still going to be so good that it's going to sound massive without sounding too cluttered or sounding too messy. So when you keep things simple, you use the orchestration form, double down on what's already there instead of just adding in a bunch of random things you don't really need, you're going to end up with a so much more clean and pure orchestration and a better mix. So to summarize, keep things simple, focus on writing a few good and well-connected elements rather than a mess that you're trying to sound okay together, and keep separation in mind at this stage, as it's going to be crucial to getting a good mix, a good orchestration, and a compelling composition in general. Now, let's move over to the next lecture, where I'm going to go through the principles for achieving a clear foreground, middle ground, and background in your compositions. I'll see you guys there.